I want you to picture a man who gave everything, not some of it, everything. His time, his loyalty, his love, his trust, poured out completely into the people around him. Now, I want you to picture those same people, one by one, choosing to destroy him. Not strangers, not enemies. The ones who sat at his table. The ones who knew his mother's name. The ones he called at 2 a.m. This is the story of Marcus Reed. And before it's over, you're going to question every person in your own life. Marcus Reed grew up in Atlanta, the youngest of 4, raised by a mother who worked 2 jobs and a father who left when Marcus was 9. That absence didn't break him, it built him. By 32, Marcus had done what most people only talk about. He owned a small construction business. Nothing flashy, but it was his. He had a woman named Simone, who he'd loved for 6 years. A best friend named Deshawn, who'd been beside him since the 8th grade. And a business partner named Trey, who he trusted with his money, his name, and his future. Marcus wasn't rich, but he was solid. And in his world, being solid meant everything. What nobody tells you about betrayal is that it never starts on the day it happens. It starts years before. In small moments you brush off. In comments that sting a little too much. In silences that last a second too long. Simone had been pulling away for months. Marcus noticed, but he told himself it was stress. Deshawn had stopped celebrating Marcus's wins the way he used to. Marcus noticed, but he told himself that's just how men are. Trey had been asking strange questions about the business accounts. Marcus noticed, but he told himself Trey was just being thorough. The truth is, Marcus noticed everything. He just loved these people too much to believe what he was seeing. It started with numbers that didn't add up. Marcus had been so focused on building the business, taking meetings, managing crews, chasing contracts, that he had trusted Trey to handle the books. They'd known each other 4 years. Trey had been the best man at his cousin's wedding. Marcus had co-signed a loan for him. So when the accountant called and told Marcus that $47,000 was missing from the business account, Marcus didn't believe it. He sat in his truck for 45 minutes. Just sat there. Because the math was clear. But the math meant that Trey, the man who ate at his mother's table, had been stealing from him for over a year. Slowly, carefully, like someone who had planned it from the beginning. Marcus drove to Trey's apartment that same night. He didn't call ahead. He knocked on the door. And when Trey opened it, Marcus didn't shout. He didn't grab him. He just held up the documents and said one word. Why? And what Trey said next was something Marcus would hear in his head for years. Trey looked him dead in the eyes and said, "Because you were always going to be fine, Marcus. You always land on your feet. I needed it more than you did." There was no remorse in his voice, no shame, just a quiet belief that Marcus somehow owed him something, that his success was unfair, that stealing from him was almost justified. Marcus closed the door. He drove home, and he never spoke to Trey again. Marcus called Deshawn that same night, not to tell him what happened with Trey, just to hear a familiar voice, to feel like something in his world was still steady. Deshawn didn't pick up. Marcus thought nothing of it. He texted. No reply. 3 days passed. Then a week. Then Marcus found out why through someone else entirely, a mutual friend who assumed Marcus already knew. Deshawn and Simone had been seeing each other for 4 months. 4 months. While Marcus was working 14-hour days to build something real. While he was coming home to Simone, kissing her forehead, telling her he was doing it all for them. His best friend of 19 years was with her. In the moments, Marcus wasn't there. In the silence Marcus had left behind. Marcus went home and waited for Simone. When she walked in and saw his face, she knew immediately that he knew. She didn't deny it. She sat down across from him at the kitchen table, and she said something that cut deeper than the betrayal itself. She said, "Marcus, I didn't leave you for Deshawn. I left you because you were never really here. You were always chasing something, and I got tired of being the person waiting for you to arrive." Marcus listened to every word, and when she finished, he said, 6 years, Simone. I was building it for you." She looked at him and said, "I never asked you to." She left that night with 2 bags, and Marcus sat at that kitchen table, the same table you saw at the beginning of this story. And he didn't move for 3 hours. What Marcus didn't know, what he would only discover weeks later, was that some of his own family had known. Not everything, but enough. His older brother had seen Deshawn and Simone together at a restaurant 2 months before everything fell apart. He said nothing. His cousin had heard whispers about Trey and the money. She said nothing. When Marcus finally confronted them, not with anger, but with a simple question. "Why didn't you tell me?" his brother said. "I didn't want to be involved." Marcus nodded slowly. And in that moment, he understood something that would change him permanently. The people who stay silent when you're being destroyed, they are not neutral. Silence in those moments is a choice, and it is its own kind of betrayal. Within 3 months, the business was on the edge of collapse. Without Trey managing the accounts, and with the $47,000 gone, Marcus couldn't make payroll. He had to let 2 of his workers go, men with families, men who trusted him. That hit him harder than anything. The apartment felt like a crime scene he couldn't leave. He stopped eating properly, stopped returning calls. He'd sit in his truck outside the apartment for an hour before going in, because going in meant facing the silence Simone had left behind. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes after mass betrayal. It's not just the pain of what happened. It's the complete rewriting of your past. Every memory becomes a question. Every laugh you shared. Was it real? Every promise. Did they mean it? Marcus wasn't just grieving people. He was grieving the version of his life he thought he'd been living. Marcus told me that the turning point wasn't dramatic. There was no revelation, no sign from above. It was a Tuesday morning. He was standing in the bathroom, hadn't shaved in 2 weeks, looking at himself in the mirror. And he asked himself one question out loud. He said, "Are you going to let them take the rest of your life too?" He stood there for a long time, and then, slowly, he answered himself. "No, just that." One word. No applause, no music, no one watching. Just a man alone in a bathroom, making a quiet decision that nobody would ever see. But that decision, that single, silent, unseen decision, was the beginning of everything that came next. Marcus didn't rebuild his life in a moment. He rebuilt it in inches. First he made his bed. Then he cooked a real meal. Then he called his accountant back. Then he called a lawyer about Trey. Then he drove to the worksite, alone, and walked the whole thing. Slow, like he was relearning it. He started writing. Not journaling. He told me he hated that word. Just writing. Thoughts. Plans. Things he wanted. Things he refused to accept. He stopped explaining himself to people who hadn't earned the explanation. He stopped being available to everyone. And something strange started happening. The smaller his world got, the stronger he got. Because for the first time in his life, every person in it was there, because they deserved to be. Here is the part of the story that surprised me most when Marcus told it. He said, and I want you to hear this carefully, he said that losing everything was the most clarifying experience of his life. Not because it was good. It wasn't. It was devastating. But because when everything was stripped away, the relationship, the friendship, the business partner, the family loyalty, what was left was just him. And for the first time, he had to figure out if that was enough. He told me, I spent 32 years being defined by who loved me and who I was loyal to. When all of that disappeared, I had to ask, who am I when there's nobody watching? Nobody depending on me? Nobody to perform strength for? The answer he found in that silence, that answer, became the foundation he rebuilt on. 14 months after the night everything collapsed, Marcus Reed reopened his business, not with a big announcement, not with a celebration. He just showed up at the worksite at 6 a.m. one Monday morning, unlocked the gate, and started working. He had settled the legal matter with Trey quietly, recovered a portion of what was stolen, enough to stabilize. He had rebuilt his crew, smaller this time, but every person chosen carefully. He had stopped waiting for Deshaun to apologize. He had stopped waiting for Simone to explain. He had stopped waiting for his family to understand. Because waiting for people who don't see your worth to finally see it is the longest and most useless wait in the world. Marcus was done waiting. He was building. I asked Marcus if he could go back and change it, would he? He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I would change what they did. I wouldn't change what it made me. He told me something I haven't stopped thinking about since. He said, the people who betray you, they think they're taking something from you. But what they don't realize is that they're also showing you something. They're showing you exactly who they are, who you were to them, and who you no longer need to be for anyone. He paused. Then he said, they freed me. They just didn't mean to. That was the moment I knew. This story wasn't really about betrayal at all. It was about a man who got lost in other people and found himself when they left. Marcus Reed lost his money, his woman, his best friend, his business partner, and the blind trust he had in his own blood, all within the same season of his life. And he rebuilt. Not perfectly, not without scars, but he rebuilt on something none of them could touch, himself. If you are in your own version of what Marcus went through, if you are sitting in the silence that betrayal leaves behind, I want you to hear this. The people who left were not your foundation. You were. You always were. You just didn't know it yet. This has been Life with No Balance, where we tell the stories that people are too afraid to say out loud. Subscribe, share this with someone who needs it, and come back.